Well, hello there everyone, my name is Amy, this is The Opinionated Woman, and welcome back to Crafty Reads, the series where I craft and I talk about the last 5 books that I've read. This time we're not on the couch, we're not crocheting, we are working on a new collage project. So I have this little book and it came from some kind of card game, a dirty card game that my dad's girlfriend like years ago gave to me. And I didn't want to just throw it away. I thought it was a waste. So I thought what I would do is collage. I've done that page, just like adding text and texture and background. And I'm going to put different patterns on each page, and then I'm going to use that as a base to work on the page. So I did that the last time that I worked on this. And I've got a bunch of ephemera here that I can work with. And I'm just going to chat to you about the books that I've read. So come along, let's get started. Starting off with a bang. Oh, by the way, this is a Defenbachia Amy, which I bought because it has my name. And I got it for my birthday yesterday for myself. So she is going to be the guest today to hold my books up. So starting off with a bang, I read Country of My Skull by Ankie Kroch. And I made a joke in my vlog that I was reading a horror, and you know, I might as well have been. Country of My Skull is a South African non-fiction following the setup and the functioning of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. If you don't know what that is, after apartheid, they set up a committee called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to try and basically hear all of the victims' stories about things that happened during apartheid, hear their accusers, and then try and give some kind of reparations for the victims or their families. And Desmond Tutu was one of the main people on this committee, and the story is told by Ankie Kroch, who was there while she was reporting. She's a radio reporter, and she was reporting on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission when it was happening, and then she wrote a book about it. And she's also a poet, so it's not written in like a really dense non-fiction-y way. It's written really beautifully, and that made it so much easier to read because, oh my god, the shit in here is harrowing. Oh fucking hell. Like, you think you know about the atrocities that happened during apartheid, and then you hear stories like this and you're like, I had no fucking idea. I mean, Nelson Mandela was released the year I was born, and we had our first democratic election when he was elected as president in 1994. So I wasn't like present when this stuff was happening, but that was around the sort of time that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission started. And we hear from these victims or these victims' families because the victims didn't make it. And some of these stories are so, like all of these stories are so harrowing and hard to hear. And it's just, oh, goodness gracious, like it's so easy, especially as a white person, to be completely ignorant of this stuff, and to stay ignorant because it's easier. But I think especially as white South Africans, like any South African would benefit from reading this book, but as a white South African especially, I think it's something that's really important, and it's written in a way that's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Accessible. So yeah, this is a really good one. I'm glad I picked it up. Then I started my, then I started my set of library books that I got from my last trip because I hadn't gone birthday book shopping yet. So my supplies were looking very low. Luckily, since my birthday happened, I have restocked, and there will be a book haul coming very, very soon. So the first book that I read from the library was Himself by Jess Kidd. I read Things in Jars by Jess Kidd on audio on Scribd a couple of years ago, and I really enjoyed it. So I was like, as soon as I saw Himself on the shelves, I was like, okay, yeah, this is for me. And it's set in Ireland, which is, you know, himself. I can't say it properly. But so it's set in Ireland in this tiny little town. And it's very much one of those towns where like everybody knows everybody. but it's got a lot of secrets and history and stuff like that, and everybody knows everybody, and everybody's linked together in some kind of complicated manner. So this boy appears in Mahoney. What is his name, Mahoney? Yes. So Mahoney appears in this town, and he is looking for where he came from, basically. He was an orphan, and he grew up in a orphanage in Dublin, and he has managed to track his mother back to this tiny little town, and he's trying to dig up what happened to her, because at the beginning of the story we get a pretty hectic murder, and we get the impression that this is Mahoney's mother. So he's basically trying to find out what happened to him by immersing himself into the life of this village. And he stays at this boarding house that's run by this beautiful young girl and this cranky old woman who wears like a series of different wigs. She's like very eccentric and wild. She's great. And with a lot of Jess Kidd's books, she has a element of magical realism in it. So Mahoney can see ghosts, and what is this old lady's name? Mrs. Corley. So Mrs. Corley knows about the ghosts and things like that, but she can't see them herself, but Mahoney can see ghosts, so he gets some of his info from the dead, basically, and he sees them popping up throughout, you know, like the house that he stays in, the woods nearby, in the pub. There's always a dead man on the pub stool, you know, like holding up the bar, like he did when he was alive. So like having that like ghosty aspect to it just adds like so much to this, because like as a historical fiction this would have been good anyway, but adding in the magical realism just like gives it so much more atmosphere. And the fact that it was set in Ireland, it was bloody lovely. It was bloody lovely. And I thought that it kind of ended very abruptly. I think I would have liked a little bit more exposition at the end, and it wasn't very long, so it did have space for that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Ugh, my leg's going to sleep. I'm going to be up like this now. I hope my head's in shot. I think it's because I'm wearing very tight overalls. Okay, so the next book that I picked up was We Need New Names by Violet Bulawayo. And this is I think she was born in Zimbabwe, but she grew up in the US, I think. So we're following our main character, Darlene, who is at the beginning of the story maybe around 11. And they're running through the streets of this, whatever town they are in Zimbabwe. And it's around the time of the 2008 elections, which, because it was Robert Mugabe, the elections were rigged and they didn't get the results that the country needed because the country was in desperate need. And yeah, he stayed in power. You know, all this disastrous things happen in that country like on a regular basis. So Darlene is living in this very, like, not a very stable sort of situation. But at the same time, she really loves her life, and she loves her friends, and she loves the games that they play and everything like that in the streets. Like, they literally be having like the worst home situations. The one child is pregnant, and they're so little, they don't really understand how the baby got there. So they don't really understand the trauma that their friend has gone through. But they're just happily having their life in this town, and they can't go to school anymore. There aren't any teachers. So they're just basically making their way, and you get to see life really through a child's point of view and like a child's kind of mindset. Even things that they misunderstood, like Detroit, Michigan, they called Destroy Michigan, because it's spelled Michigan, but they say it Michigan because they've never seen it written down, so they don't know it's Detroit, Michigan, because they always hear those words together. So it's like very much the way a child would hear things and explain things to themselves in their head and fill in little gaps, which is really sweet. But yeah, there is a lot of trauma in this book. Like, they obviously, she's not in the best situation, and oh, and I forgot to say, her friends, her one friend is called Chippo, her other friend is called Spo, and one child is called God Knows, and the other child is called Bastard. I don't know why, but those are their names. It must be a nickname of some sort. I just thought it was quite funny. And there's a lot of joy in the way that she talks about, the things that her and her friends get up to. But obviously her mother wants more for her. She wants her to get an education. She wants her to be in a more safe environment. So she ends up going to the US to stay with her aunt. And this is all in the whatchamacallit. It's in the blurb. So I'm not spoiling anything. But it's like, while the situation that she's in the US is much safer, it's very much like making her struggle with her identity, because the place that she grew up is so different to the places that the people that she knows in the US grew up in. She's very much other. She doesn't she stands out because she's an immigrant and she's illegal as well. So there's just a whole bunch of complexity to it, and she looks back on those times being in Zimbabwe, being with her friends, and that's like where she felt the most at home and the most herself. So it's a beautiful expedition into identity and finding a place for yourself, I guess. Then I read Distress Signals by Catherine Ryan Howard. And Distress Signals, I decided to pick it up because I read another one of this author's books last year, and it was only okay. It was called Rewind. But I decided, I'm going to try another one of hers, because I'm always on the lookout for thriller authors. And I like to give authors like 2 tries, unless they do something particularly heinous. I do like to give them a little bit of a try. So I decided to pick up Distress Signals. And firstly, I thought I was going to DNF it because the narrator was so unbearably slow. And then I was like, wait, you can speed it up. I know so many people who do booktube and stuff like that speed up their audiobooks. I can't do it. I can't take it in. It makes me stressed. But this one, I went up to 1.2 speed so that it wasn't ridiculously slow, because it was so slow it was painful. So we're following our main character. Is his name Joe? I think his name is Joe. And he basically goes and drops off his girlfriend at the airport. She's going to a conference in Spain for work, and from that point on he doesn't hear from her. One of her messages on WhatsApp gets read, and he's like calling and he can't seem to track her down. But unfortunately the police are not doing anything to help them, because she's very much, she's an adult, she could have disappeared of her own accord, and a lot of the actions that she'd been doing, it hinted at the fact that she might have disappeared on purpose. But Joe is determined. He's no, she wouldn't do that. She wouldn't fucking disappear on us. And he's determined to basically find out what happened to her. And I thought it was kind of twisty, and it was pretty good. I felt like it wasn't paced as well as I'd like. And I think that's what happens with a lot of thrillers for me, is it's just not paced right. And this one, I felt like it could have been shorter to get the story across, but it did have some good twists, and maybe I'll give her one last try, and I'll film a one last try video. I haven't filmed a one last try in a very long time, so I'll film one of those for Catherine Ryan Howard, maybe for a new one. And then the last one I finished this morning, and that's A Place for Us by Fatima Fahim Mirza. This book I picked up because Jen Campbell went freaking nuts for this book a few years ago. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take her recommendation and I'm going to read it. So we're following an Indian Muslim family that live in the US, and they are a family of 5, 2 daughters, Hadia and Huda, and the mother and father, and the daughter, their son Amar. And my butt's going to sleep. I'm going to be moving up and down. These were not the right pants to shoot in. Anyway, so we're following their story basically from when they were children. We mainly get views from Amar, and we sometimes get it from Huda, and a lot of the time from the mother Layla. And then only right at the end do we get a series of chapters from the father's point of view. For some reason, we don't get much of Huda. You can tell she was the daughter that was sort of left on the wayside. Maybe that's why it was written that way. But we're following this family, and we know at the beginning of the story, because it starts at Hadia's wedding before going back into the past, and then it dots around through different points in their history, basically, to tell the story of this family, because it is like a family saga, because it starts when they're children and it ends when the children have their own children. And Amar is very much struggling because he's not the type of child that's very good at schoolwork. He doesn't have a lot of motivation when it comes to schoolwork, and he feels like there's a lot of pressure on him because Hadia is so smart. But at the same time, Amar really struggles with the strict sort of rules under his religion, and whether he actually believes in that religion or not, or whether he's just going along with what the family want him to do. 9/11 happens at that point, so Hadia and Huda have to decide whether they want to wear hijab at school because they're getting like racist remarks and things like that, which is very hard to read. But like such a expression of actually what it was really like. So this book is really about identity, because like even while Amar feels like he's, sort of the child that's like not a lot of this is expected of, at the same time he is doted after in a way because he's the son, and Hadia really feels like she's always like running to catch up, even though she's like the smart and beautiful and all of this kind of stuff. She feels like, she's never going to quite be what Amar is to her parents. I didn't finish my story. So at the beginning of the book, we started Hadia's wedding, and Amar has come to the wedding, and it's clear that he's been gone for quite a number of years and they haven't seen him, and this is the first time the family are going to see him. And then we go back and find out like what happened and why. But I thought it was really delicately done. It is a little bit overly religious for what I usually like. I have a lot of religious trauma. I'm very atheist. I'm very much like, you believe in whatever you want to believe in, whatever makes you happy, as long as you're not hurting anybody. But I don't personally like to read a lot of religious stuff. But I still thought it was like really well done and a good look into a community that I'm not a part of. And that is the Crafty Reads, everybody. I did these book pages, and I did these rose paper and these combs. Yeah, so I'm going to carry on adding to those pages, and then I'm going to make an individual collage over each 2-page spread. So I'm quite pleased with and excited with how it's going to come out. If you did enjoy that, please like, comment, subscribe, all of that fun stuff, and I'll check you next time.